Meanwhile, the U.S. could soon be testing nuclear weapons for the first time in more than 30 years. President Donald Trump last week directed the country to start testing the weapons in a Truth Social post, claiming that the move is to counter China and Russia testing them as well. The U.S. Secretary of Energy said this weekend that the test won't include nuclear explosions. Still, the president's post is prompting conversations about what a return to nuclear testing could look like and the impact it could have worldwide. Joining us for now more is Dr. Micah Harris, Senior Program Coordinator and Research Fellow at Duke University's Transformative Ideas Program, who's done extensive research on nuclear weapons policy. Dr. Harris, great to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me here.
A couple of months ago, I bet you didn't think you'd be here talking about this, maybe, right?
No.
What is the world that you research in? What does this news mean? How do you read into it?
So what I read into it is, as you said earlier, the United States stopped testing nuclear weapons in 1992. It was the end of the Cold War, and the Soviet Union was losing access to its test site in Kazakhstan, and the U.S. didn't want to do an arms race anymore. So we haven't done this kind of nuclear explosions for over 30 years. What they have done, and you've seen the Secretary of Energy talking about this, is they test every piece of the sequence that would detonate a nuclear weapon, and they test them separately so that you can test all the linkages, make sure all the components work without actually creating a seismic event like an earthquake underground, or worse than that, an atmospheric contamination. So that's, I think, what would be such a major switch would be to go back to nuclear detonations.
And so the fact that they're now saying they may not go that far, what does that mean then? They just go, do you know?
So what it means, no, I don't have a
direct
secret
line
into, yeah. But I can guess a little bit, which is that historically there's been a technical demonstration, right? We would blow up a nuclear weapon, and we would take a lot of pictures of it, and we would send them out. That's why you can find so many pictures of mushroom clouds on the internet, is because we wanted people to see what we could do. So there was a technical capability there, but there was also publicity. You wanted to tell your enemies, leave me alone, your friends, you're safe with me. And I think that's some of what the president's trying to get now. And
we see that in North Korea, essentially, right? Not the nuclear, but that testing, that is a bravado in some ways, right?
There is a bravado to it. And you see, even in the last month, Russia has tested novel delivery vehicles and talked about it and gotten a fair amount of publicity. They at least claim to have tested a nuclear-powered torpedo and a nuclear-powered cruise missile, and they got a lot of attention for it. Our nuclear weapons have been so reliable and so safe for so long that we haven't felt the need to do that kind of big banner test. And I think the president's trying to find a way to remind people that we can do that too.
There is a danger to doing that, I assume, right? I mean, is there a point of it could provide escalation from other countries?
Yeah, so I was doing a little research at Duke. Back in the 1960s, they were building fallout shelters. They were building space to put the whole Duke population underground, and they were stocking them with food and water. But more than that, they were stocking them with tranquilizers, antibiotics, libraries. They thought people would be down there long enough to panic, to catch diseases and start an epidemic, long enough to start book clubs. People had started assuming they were either going to die in a flash or have to live underground for weeks to let the radiation go down. And what's happened since then? The weapons haven't gotten any safer. We still have the ability to use them. In fact, they've gotten more lethal. We've gained capability since then. But what's happened is we've stopped waving them around so much. We've psychologically gotten used to the fact they exist, and we've started trusting our leaders to not use them. And that's all reversible, right? And that's the stakes of getting into some kind of a signaling war here. It can be deeply terrifying in a way most of us don't want to go back to.
I know you're not a geopolitical guy, but could it work too? I mean, you mentioned that Vladimir Putin got a lot of attention and whatnot. Or does the world know enough about the United States where it may not be necessary for other countries to see?
So there are other ways that you can remind people. You can do exercises that you would operate the airplanes, the ships, and the missiles, again, without actually making a detonation, and remind people, hey, this exists, we can use it. a bit of a contrast here. You can even see this in the president's Truth Social post, is China, because China is building its capabilities without this kind of signaling. And you can tell from his post that they both make him, he's interested in both of them in a certain way, right? Because there's a certain kind of nervousness or terror you can get from the silent buildup, and that's the China approach. And there's a certain kind of nervousness or terror you can get from the bravado, and that's the Russia approach. And you can see this president trying to decide between those two, or if he has his own signature brand that he's going to use between them.
And just to be clear, from what we were talking about earlier, there's no reason why we need to test them to make sure they work. We know that they work.
These worked the first time we tried them. The first test in 1945 went off just like we expected it to. The second device was a new device, and we used it. We dropped it over Japan the first time we used it, and it worked. We've known how to build these. We've known that they worked for 80 years, and nothing's changed.
What is it like in your world right now? Because normally you guys study your stuff. It's really in depth. You don't come on TV and do this stuff normally. Has it been kind of wild? I don't mean politically, but is it a unique time for y'all?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you see in international relations scholars and even scholars that are right-wing and somewhat aligned with the president are always trying to sort of find a way to build a theory out of his practice. And it's a scramble to try to find out what is unpredictability a theory of its own? Maybe so, and maybe that's the one that the president does use, sometimes very deliberately. Or is there an underlying coherence to it that he's building out over time? And so, yeah, it's a guessing game in a certain way.
I grew up in the 80s. I remember some of the Cold War, all that kind of stuff. Is there a feeling that we could get back to that somehow if this went any further? Not specifically the Cold War, but something along those lines.
Yeah, there's a mixture of nostalgia for the Cold War, which was in some ways a simple world, at least in retrospect and in memory. It was a world where there was a lot of intimidation, there was massive technological innovation, and then we didn't go to war and kill a lot of people. And so there's some nostalgia for, I think, even repeating that. And then people who have a more granular memory of it, it was a terrible time. Europe was fenced apart, and a large part of it had no agency and freedom and was held in some kind of ideological captivity to the Soviet Union. And so you see in Europe, I think, a lot of nervousness that it's not a place we want to go back, and we need to stay out of that.
Okay. Well, it's complex stuff. We appreciate you breaking it down. It's good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage. And click the subscribe button here. You can also download our app and watch us on TV to learn more about the candidates, where they stand on the issues, and more. We'll see you then.